Welcome to Altnabreac Towers, Episode 1, How It All Began. Just a quick note before we start. The following episode is a work of fiction inspired by true events. Altnabreac Station was the sort of place you couldn't find unless you weren't looking for it. One platform, one bench, and a timetable that had clearly been written by someone who'd lost a bet. The wilderness stretched in all directions, an endless expanse of bog, pine, and wind that howled like a drunk uncle at a wedding. And there, perched proudly, or perhaps sulkily, beside the station, stood Station Cottage, a squat, drafty little house whose curtains twitched more often than a caffeinated squirrel. Behind those curtains lurked Ian Appleby and Liz Howe, Cathanis's most unlikely sentinels, self-appointed guardians of the railway and self-declared victims of the system. Liz was the chief twitcher. Morning, noon, or night, if so much as a sheep sneezed on the horizon, the curtains would snap open and her face would appear. Nose pressed flat to the glass, eyes narrowed with suspicion. Ian handled the commentary. "Who's that?" Liz would hiss. "Spy," Ian muttered darkly, sipping tea that sloshed onto his dressing gown. "That's not a spy, that's a hiker. Exactly best disguise there is. Nobody suspects hikers. Except us." And so began the endless litany of suspicion. Hikers were intelligence officers. Cyclists were Vatican agents. Birdwatchers were surveillance specialists with binoculars concealed as, well, binoculars. And every single person who got off the train was without question working for ScotRail. Poor unsuspecting visitors never knew. They were too busy marveling at the wilderness, fumbling with rucksacks, or trying not to sink knee-deep in bog. But from inside Station Cottage, they were being catalogued in exquisite paranoid detail. A spiral notebook lived permanently on the counter, its cover labeled in large block capitals, "Suspicious Activity Log." Entries included gems like 1207, man with hat. Too big. What is he hiding under there? 1211, woman smiled at ticket inspector. Possible seduction attempt. Satanic undertones. 1215, cyclist fell off bike deliberately. Diversion tactic. When Liz showed the notebook to the one neighbor brave enough to stop by, he just blinked at it, nodded politely, and said he had to get back to feed the cows. He didn't have any cows. Things only escalated with groups. A party of 6 walkers disembarking at once was treated as a full-scale invasion. Liz would dart from window to window like a panicked meerkat, whisper shouting the numbers, 2 at the gate, 3 at the signpost. "My God, Ian, one's got a map. They're plotting." And sweating under the strain of leadership, fetched the binoculars. They were second-hand, bought at a car boot sale in Wick, and magnified everything so much that most of his surveillance consisted of staring at sheep nostrils the size of dinner plates. "They're definitely signaling," he muttered, squinting. "He's waving his walking pole. He's pointing at the hills," Liz snapped. "Pointing for whom? Answer me that." The visitors, oblivious, tramped happily into the moor, unaware that their every movement had been logged in a paranoid notebook and discussed at length over ham sandwiches. Cyclists were worse. Lycra offended Ian on principle. "That sort of outfit," he announced, "is not decent, not Scottish, not Christian. It's French." Liz, peering furiously through the curtains, nodded. "Look at him, recording everything with that helmet camera. He's probably live streaming to Network Rail HQ." Ian crossed his arms, or MI5 or the Vatican or both. Joint operation. The cyclist, meanwhile, was simply trying to pedal through peat bog without drowning. By early evening, after the train had gone and the landscape was once again silent, Ian and Liz would sit at the kitchen table, piecing together the evidence into elaborate diagrams. Sheets of paper covered with arrows, circles, and names filled the room. At the center of every diagram, scrawled in capitals, was the word "Scotrail." The paranoia grew by the week. Sheep wandering too close to the gate were accused of being drones. Birds were listening devices. The wind itself, howling through the pine trees, was suspicious. Then came the Germans. One wet Tuesday afternoon, a smiling German couple stepped off the train, backpacks bulging, maps in hand. They waved cheerfully at the cottage. Liz hit the floor as though under sniper fire. "Foreign agents?" she hissed. Ian ducked too, though he banged his head on the windowsill. "I knew it." The Germans, oblivious, shouted "Hallo," and trudged into the wilderness. Ian and Liz spent the evening constructing a vast conspiracy map involving the Bavarian Hiking Association, Deutschbahn, and the European Union. By midnight, they were convinced the couple had bugged the gate. Ian went outside in his slippers, rattled the chain, and shouted at the sheep, "We know what you're up to." The sheep just chewed in silence. It was, of course, inevitable that this paranoia would one day spill over from twitching curtains to full-blown confrontation. The final straw came with the 12:42 service from Wick, a modest little two-carriage train. It trundled through the wilderness without fanfare except on this particular Wednesday, when Ian and Liz, convinced they were about to be overrun by infiltrators, stormed out of Station Cottage and planted themselves squarely on the tracks. The driver, used to sheep, rabbits, and the occasional stag, was not accustomed to finding two middle-aged zealots waving a Bible and a pair of binoculars. He slammed on the brakes, blew the whistle, and shouted things that cannot be reprinted. Ian roared back, "You'll not take us alive." Liz shook her fist. "We moved here for peace and quiet." Passengers peered out the windows, half curious, half terrified, while the train sat steaming in the bog. A German tourist attempted to film the incident but was met with Liz bellowing, "Agent, put that camera down." By the time the police arrived, Ian was in full flow about conspiracies at the highest level, while Liziever, the ex-police officer, was lecturing the constables on how to perform a correct arrest procedure. "You're supposed to caution me," she barked. "We did," one officer sighed. "Well, do it again. You mumbled the first time." And so, with much huffing, puffing, and paper shuffling, the pair were carted off to Inverness Sheriff Court, where they loudly declared themselves innocent of everything except loving freedom and truth. The sheriff sighed, rubbed his temples, and muttered something that sounded very much like, "God help Caithness." And so it began. Altnabreac, the quietest station in Scotland, transformed forever into the backdrop of a farce so ridiculous it made Basil Fawlty look well-adjusted. The saga of Altnabreac Towers had truly started. What happens next? You'll have to subscribe to find out in our next episode. Thanks for watching.